Question: does all of the emotional pain come from the focusing on the false self? And in a sense, the answer is yes, but I would rephrase it a little bit, because what I've explained in many of my videos is that we are exposed to various difficult situations on Earth. And we react to these situations by creating one of these subconscious selves or separate selves. What is in the question is called a false self. And it resides in our subconscious minds. And it forms what's like a perception filter. So what happens is that, as I've also explained in several videos, I'm not going to go over it again here in detail, is that the core of our being is what I call the conscious you. And it's not these outer selves, it's not the outer personality. So it doesn't really have it's more like a pure awareness or neutral awareness, which many people have experienced when they had mystical experiences. So the conscious you creates this self. And now, whenever we are in a situation that triggers this self, the conscious you is pulled into it. And now we are experiencing the situation, or even experiencing life, from inside the self, which means it's like we are seeing life through that perception filter of the self. Like wearing colored glasses. Or it's being inside a bunker and we just have this little hole we can see out through, and the hole is covered by colored glass. So everything we see is distorted. And that's what creates the emotional pain. So I wouldn't say that it's when we are focusing on the conscious self, because it makes it sound like we are outside and now we are looking at the conscious self. We actually go inside the conscious self. And it's still the conscious you. The pain doesn't come from the conscious you. The pain comes from the subconscious self. So it's really the self that is creating the pain. That's the perception filter, the coloring. And it's only when the conscious you is inside the self that it's experiencing the pain. That's why you can have, like I've had in my life, for example, have had some situations when I did something I felt was very embarrassing. And whenever I was reminded of that situation, I would feel the pain. Like, for example, I had an experience when I was, 16, 17. I had a crush on a girl, and I tried to talk to her, and I really felt like I've made a fool of myself. We couldn't have a conversation. We were both nervous. Probably never experienced anything like that, right? And so even years after, whenever I was reminded, I would feel like, oh gosh, pain in my heart. And that's because when I was reminded of it, the conscious you slipped into the self. But most of the time, the conscious you wasn't inside the self. It may have been inside other selves, but it was not inside that particular self. And then some situation in mind, and now there I was again, And so it took me quite a long time to become aware of this and dissolve the self. Well, now I can think back at the situation and basically laugh at it and say, wow, I was a teenager. What do you expect? Perfection at 16, or at 66, whatever. It's always a silly expectation. So that's how I would say it. And that's why, it's not a matter of forcing yourself not to focus on the self. For many years, that was the only approach I could think of. Was to deny the experience. Whenever I was reminded of it, I would refuse to go into it. I would refuse to think about it. I would deny it. But there actually comes a point where you have to become aware of it. And then as the conscious you're actually going right inside that self. Your tendency is, whenever you feel emotional pain, you don't want to go into it, right? You want to run away from it. But there comes a point where you're ready for this, and you have the teachings about these subconscious selves. You can go right into it. And when you do, you experience there's nothing in there. It's like going into the eye of a hurricane. There's nothing in there. Emotional energy. But then you might be able to discover the belief behind the self, the belief that the self is based on. And when you see that belief and see that it's really an illusion, you can let the self die. And that's freedom from the emotional pain. Now also the component that emotional pain is, of course, simply energy qualified with a fear-based vibration. And the energy also has a certain pull on the conscious you, and that's why you can give these decrees and invocations to transform the energy. You're invoking high-frequency energy from the Ascended Master that transforms the fear-based energy. It's love-based energy transforming the fear. And then as the pull from the energy itself gets less, you can more easily look at it neutrally and discover the belief. I experienced myself that this particular situation I'm talking about, after I found the Ascended Master teachings, which was, I don't know, 8-10 years after this happened, after I had given violet flame decrees for some months, I realized that whenever I was reminded of that particular situation, the pain wasn't as intense. And that was really when I first time realized that decrees have an actual, measurable, noticeable effect, because I didn't have the sharp pain that I used to have. And gradually it got less and less, but it really wasn't until I much later received these teachings from the Ascended Masters about the subconscious selves that I was able to look at this, see it as a self, identify it, and just let it go. I mean, just let it go. Basically, you're saying, I don't want to experience life this way anymore. I don't want to experience it through this perception filter. I don't want to experience having emotional pain. Why should I have emotional pain? Well, the reason why is because in the situation you created the belief that you should feel pain about what happened. But that's just a self that has that belief. So when you come to see that belief and see that you're the conscious you're a spiritual being, there's no reason for you to feel pain about anything that has happened on earth, at least not that particular situation. You can let it go. I mean, in my case, so what? I was 16, I talked to a girl, I made a fool of myself. Was it the end of the world? I mean, did the stars in the Andromeda galaxy get out of their orbits because I made a silly mistake here on Earth? I mean, how much did it really matter? When I was inside that self, nothing else mattered. So it was only by letting the self die that I really got to a point where I can look at it and say, okay, big deal. So I think that's, I've talked about this with the subconscious self in many other videos. So if you feel this resonates with you, look at some of those videos. Also my discourses about the ego, I talk about this. Because it really is just a matter of coming to see that the pain is just really projected upon you by this self. And you need to just let the self go, find that belief of why you think it's important, why you need to feel pain about this, why you feel that this should not have happened or something else should have happened. Why do you need to feel pain about this? It's Earth. How important are things on Earth compared to our spiritual growth, compared to coming back into oneness with our higher self? I know this isn't going to instantly help people overcome emotional pain, but at least point you in the direction. I have given many other tools for how to overcome emotional pain. So make use of those and you will go through the same transformation that I've gone through. Because I guarantee you, you may say, well, Kim felt pain because he made a fool of himself with a girl, but I've done something far worse. But the thing is, have you done something far? Is there anything on earth that's ultimately bad? Because as I've said before, this is a reality simulator. Everything here is a simulated experience. There's nothing here that's ultimately real. That's anything we do in life, right? Once the physical situation is past, the only thing that has an impact on us is the subconscious self that we created in reaction to it. And once we let go of that subconscious self, we are free of the situation. I know there can be some physical consequences we aren't free of, but we are free of the emotional pain. We have no reason to feel the emotional pain anymore. And it dies with the self. So I have experienced that, of course, with many other situations in life that were perhaps more painful than the one I'm describing, but I'm just saying that I know people who have used these teachings and tools from the Ascended Master to overcome far more dramatic outer events, or rather the emotional pain created by those events, than I have. So I know it works. And many people have proven that it works, and it can work for you as well.